So the last part of Dreambox that is in your assignment is the review. And what you're going to do, actually this is probably the easiest thing you can do. You have to click on this, A, and you know that in every single scientific notation number, it's a number and then a decimal point, right? So you just look at this number and you write it with a decimal point right after that first number, after the 5. And then you have to think, okay, I moved my decimal point over once, twice to the left. So that means that my B, when I click on this B, is 2. Because I moved my decimal point. It was here. Remember, every number has a decimal point at the end if you don't see a decimal point in the number. So I move this decimal point over 2 times. So I need to put a 2 there. Also important to note is if you have anything like this, 5.27 times 10 to the 0 power. What is 10 to the 0 power? Anything to the 0 power equals what? It equals 1, right? So 5.27 times 1 is just 5.27. Anything times 1 just keeps that number the same. Okay, so this one is the opposite. Look at this. We have a number that has a decimal in the front, so we're going to have to move that decimal to the right. If you move that decimal point to the right, you're going to get a negative exponent. And I know this is hard, but if you're taking a small number and to get it into scientific notation, you make it bigger. Let me show you what I mean by that. If I have 0.402, to get this into scientific notation, I don't really have to do any thinking too much. I just know I need to put a number and then a decimal point after it. So now let's look at the two numbers. I had a smaller number and I made it bigger. So if you're going from small to big, your exponent is going to be negative. So watch this. My A is the easy part. When I click on this, I know my number here has to look like this. All numbers that go here in front of the multiplication sign, they all have a number and then a decimal point. So that's my easy part. My hard part is knowing whether or not B, when I click on this, is B going to be negative or is it going to be a positive? Well, first of all, let's see how many places I had to move the decimal point over. My decimal point was here, and I moved it once over to the right to get it right here. So I know I'm going to have a 1 here. But is my 1 going to be positive or negative? Well, I took a smaller number, and I made it bigger. I took a smaller number, and I made it bigger. So when I'm doing smaller to bigger, my exponent is going to be negative. Okay, so for this part, let me write out an easy way to remember all this. If you move the decimal point to the right, you made a smaller number bigger, so your exponent is negative. If you move the decimal point to the left, let me give you an example of that. If I had the number 54.6 and I want to get that into scientific notation, I have to move this decimal point right in front of the first number because all scientific notation has a number and then a decimal point after it. So I had to make a bigger number. 54 is bigger than 5. I had to make a bigger number smaller. So that's a positive exponent. So if you move the decimal point to the left and make a bigger number smaller, exponent is positive, or don't put a plus sign in there. You don't need to put the plus sign. Okay? So this number, to create this number and put it into scientific notation, it would be 5.46 times 10 to the first, because I took a bigger number and I made it smaller. 54 is larger than 5. Okay? If I have to find A, and I have a smaller number and I made it bigger, 0.4 is smaller than 4, I made it bigger, I had to move the decimal point to the right, then my answer is going to have a negative exponent because I made a smaller number into a bigger number to get it into scientific notation. I know it's confusing, I totally get it, but as you continue to work on these, it's going to get easier and easier, I promise.